light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. As at the time of this recording, I always try to make my shows as timeless as possible because the episodes get replayed over and over and over again for years. And so I try not to date stamp an episode by mentioning anything that's locked in time. And so I'm going to try to address this today's topic in ways that even if people watch this 20 years from now, they'll still get something out of it. At the present time, however, that this recording is being made, I am in the process of completing a doctoral program. And on a whimsical note, it means that when I complete my doctoral program, I have a bachelor's degree in humanities, a master's degree in theological studies, and when I finish my PhD, it will be a PhD in human development. And I have been encouraged to make the ministry of Sister Who very much the focus of that. Sister Who is in fact an incarnation of the sacred clown. But I need to define that and explain that, because the sacred clown is a very broad archetypal societal role, I guess one could say. And there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of manifestations of the sacred clown. And for 28 years at this point, I have been doing the work of a sacred clown as Sister Who does she think she is? Or Sister Who does she think she is? And so as Sister Who, a lot of times the conversations I have with people revolve around issues of identity. In trying to bring the whole explanation or presentation of the sacred clown to my doctoral studies, I want to be clear that this is not about sharing all the secrets involved in being a Heyoka, which is a Lakota Native American version of a sacred clown, or being a Koshari, which is a Navajo version of a sacred clown, or being a court jester, which is perhaps a medieval European version. And I believe there are specific characters within the No theater of China and the Kabuki theater of Japan, and within various African tribes as well, where there is an equivalent of the sacred clown. And they all have different names for those specific incarnations. And I have no intention in my doctoral study of sharing all the closely guarded secrets of those particular examples. Because when I talk about the sacred clown, I'm talking about something that encompasses all of them without being reduced to any one of them. That what they all have in common is a societal role, an archetype that uses symbol and metaphor to teach and to help people keep growing through life. And that when things seem to stagnate, then send in the sacred clowns to stir things up. But it's not necessarily in an adversarial or contrary or trickster sort of way. Some sacred clowns are and some are not. Some use comedy and some don't. But in every case, there is some kind of reawakening to life that happens. One of the modern examples of a sacred clown that I'm fond of mentioning is the movie made in, I think, the mid-1960s, starring Julie Andrews, entitled Mary Poppins, which was actually based on a series of books that were written long before that. Mary Poppins does not try to be comedic or funny, and she doesn't try to make people laugh. Through unpredictable sorts of inexplicable magic, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, there are all sorts of unexplainable things that happen when Mary Poppins is around. And yet she's not trying to make people laugh, but by engaging them in these unexpected, inexplicable experiences, she manages to wake them up. Focusing on the movie, Mary Poppins, she floats in out of the sky hanging from an umbrella during a windstorm, just at the moment when the family is looking for a new nanny for their two children. And she immediately has a sort of take charge attitude. She walks in and the father thinks he's going to be interviewing her for a job, and she winds up interviewing him, reading from a letter written by the children that he had no intention of taking seriously. And so then he's trying to figure out how she got the letter, and she answers the letter completely and then tells him, after she has finished going through all the criteria listed in the letter, she says to the father, I will give you 2 weeks. At that point, I'll know, and I'll see the children now. And off she goes to her job that she basically just gave to herself. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who wish they could figure out how to do that in their situations. But that's just one example. And so then she goes to the stairwell and slides up the banister instead of down. And later on, they go to see some chalk pictures drawn on the pavement in the park. And Bert, the chimney sweep, encourages them to use their imaginations and jump into the picture. And of course, he can't quite make it happen. And she gets irate and scolds him and says, why do you always have to make simple things so difficult? And she takes their hands and they all jump into the picture and emerge in a fantasy land and have a whole different adventure. And as these totally unpredictable things keep happening, and yet none of them are comedic, they're just totally unexpected and totally imaginative and out of the ordinary. And at the end of the movie, when she floats off on her umbrella again, she didn't really bring anything with her, and she didn't take anything with her when she left. It's just Mary Poppins, her umbrella, and her carpet bag. Nothing more, nothing less, at the beginning and at the end. And yet at the end of the movie, the entire family and everyone around them are now awake to their own lives and awake to their own relationships. And they are spending time together and loving each other in ways that at the beginning of the movie they didn't. At the beginning of the movie, they were total strangers to each other. And the mother has found a new sense of purpose in life and a being valued where she didn't feel valued before. She felt ignored, and for the most part she was. She's not ignored, and the children aren't ignored, and there is love and there is true family at the end of the movie, all because of the totally wacky things that Mary Poppins did. To me, that is what a sacred clown does. And it may involve comedy or it might not. I think for me, it involves respect. Mary Poppins didn't come into the situation and assault anyone. She didn't slap them in the face. She didn't berate them or scold them or put them down. She respected them. And yet she respected them in a way that she was able to infuse the unexpected and the out of the ordinary and the challenging things that would push them toward growth. And they went through some very difficult experiences in the movie because as they became more honest with themselves and their relationships and their lives, the artificial configurations began to unravel. And at the end of the movie, they were left with something that was more genuine and more true and more real. And it wasn't the pretense anymore. It wasn't, I'm an important person because of the car I drive. I'm an important person because of the job I have. It's, I'm a valuable person because I have the ability to love and to learn and to grow. And that was what Mary Poppins contributed. And in my understanding, that's what a true sacred clown does. And that sacred clown may take a job as a koshari, or as a heyoka, or as a court jester, or as a mime, or any of the other possibilities. And there may be secrets that are known to people within that particular specific incarnation of the sacred clown. And those secrets are sometimes carefully guarded for various reasons. And if I were to ask each one of them, why are you keeping this secret? They would probably all have a different answer. But I'm not researching why they keep things secret. I'm researching what is the broader scope, the broader umbrella, the broader circle into which all of these examples fit. It's kind of like when I did a paper during my earlier doctoral studies entitled The Essential Contribution of Spiritual Vocation. And I wrestled with the question of what do all ministers, rabbis, priests, medicine men, life coaches, what do they all have in common? And the conclusion that I finally came to after 100 pages of writing was that it all has to do with how one relates the self to that which is greater than the self, that which is not yet understood, that which is not known even. It's mystery, it's undiscovered. And yet somehow I have to have a positive relationship to it, even in its mystery, so that I can go on with my life without feeling paranoid or pessimistic. Or Murphy's Law only applies to me. The idea that anything that can go wrong will, and at the worst possible moment. It's not that the world is out to get you or me or anyone. It's that life happens. And there are seasons of drought, and there are seasons of plenty. And if we work together, we live through all of them. The challenge that I would put to the individual incarnations of the sacred clown is how to guard their secrets in a way that the wisdom will not be lost from one generation to the next. And if that means having one volume of notes that is not shown to anyone except other heyokas, or not anyone except other kosharis, or not anyone except other court jesters, or mimes, or that they have their own internal sacred text, if you will, that nobody else gets to see, but it's written down so that if all of the heyokas were killed in a flood, and a year later a young man has a dream by which the tribe recognizes, I think you're being called to be a heyoka. The tribe can then say to the man, we don't have a heyoka to mentor you. We do have all of their wisdom written down so that it wouldn't be lost. To make sure that the wisdom isn't lost, even while the identity and the sanctity of the role is preserved in a restricted sort of fashion. During the Middle Ages, in the cathedrals, they created what were called morality plays, because most of the population was illiterate and couldn't read books. And so they had to have moral lessons, the difference between right and wrong, performed for them in a theatrical fashion. And they would do these performances within the cathedrals and use biblical stories, and sometimes the devil would appear and tempt them, or an angel would appear and advise them. And in the midst of that, representing humanity, was this character called Everyman. And Everyman would look back and forth between the two and try to figure out what was the right thing to do. And that was how the church taught moral lessons, the difference between right and wrong. But in doing these productions, there were techniques of stagecraft that were secrets held by the people who did the performances. And according to the descriptions, there were performances where an entire band of angels was suspended within the cathedrals above the audience. How do you get actors and actresses 20 feet above the floor in a medieval cathedral? I mean, they didn't have any of the modern devices that we have. How did they do it? There's no record that I'm aware of how they did it. At least that's what they told me in theater history class in college, that we have all these descriptions, but we don't have any records of how it was done, because those were considered secrets to be told only to the other people who helped create the performances. In a way, it's kind of like the stage magicians today, that there are secrets of how to do a particular trick that may be shared from one magician to the next, but they are not shared with the general public in order to keep the performance effective, in order to give the audience that sense of wow, and I am so completely amazed by this. And in a way, stage magicians also can be another form of the sacred clown, because they are introducing things that are outside of the norm, and they're making things happen for which we don't have an easy explanation, and it challenges our thinking. How did he do that? But also, what does it mean? I still remember watching television the night that the magician David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear, and then, of course, made it reappear again. And on one hand, I mean, one knows that something the size of the Statue of Liberty couldn't be simply moved away and put back. But how did he make it look like it had been? And how did that make people appreciate all that the statue symbolized much more than they had prior to that performance? And with the sorts of things that are possible, when another illusion I saw on television by the magician David Copperfield was when he allegedly walked through the Great Wall of China, and with all the people there and all the cameras and the heart monitor and everything else, it would seem that he must have walked through the Great Wall of China, and yet the rational part of a human mind says, well, of course he didn't, but how did he make it look like he did? And I don't expect he'll ever tell, and I don't know if anybody ever will tell, and I don't know that they need to. But the point being, these are internal secrets that are held by a select few people who, in a sense, are sworn to secrecy, because if we can't keep certain things secret, we can't be amazed by having performances like that done in front of us. And that amazement and that awe challenges our thinking and challenges the way we define ourselves, the way we define our relationships, the way we define our relationship to the world around us. So on one hand, I'm saying, yes, I understand the need for internal secrets that are not shared. On the other hand, I'm saying, somebody write it down and find somebody trustworthy to leave it with to be the steward. We don't really own things, we are the stewards of them. They're entrusted to us, and then later they're entrusted to someone else. That wisdom, if it is to recognize the value and the importance of the wisdom, and to do what one can to ensure that it is not lost, even as it is safeguarded in order to maintain its effectiveness. If everybody had understood exactly how the angelic choirs appeared in the high spaces within the cathedrals, it would have been so much less impressive and would have had much less impact and may not have changed anyone's life. They would have just said, oh yeah, I've seen it. And the church would announce that a performance of this morality play was going to be done the following Saturday, and nobody would come because they all knew how it was how it was done. Because they don't know, they go and they see, and they're affected by the performance. because people didn't know how Mary Poppins did what she did, when she did something, it totally grabbed their attention, drew them in, and gave them an experience they couldn't have any other way. And it changed them into wiser and more loving people. That, to me, is what needs to be at the heart of the ministry, and I do call it a ministry, of the sacred clown. Within certain tribal context, where comedy is employed, or in other situations where comedy is employed, there is a hypothesis, if you will, an assertion that the comedy creates this effect. And I guess I would say it would be wonderful if it does, but take the time to check and see if your performance is still having the effect that you want it to have. Mere laughter, in my opinion, is not enough to create a positive change in someone's life. There needs to be an insight and an understanding and a growth and a new perspective that finds opportunity through the laughter. And if that new perspective is not finding opportunity and is not being conveyed, and if the person is no different at the end of the performance than they were at the beginning, then the performance has, in whatever ways, mostly been a failure. Whatever performance is done, whatever rituals, whatever understandings or secrets, all of that has an intention and a goal. It has something that it's supposed to do. People are not supposed to be the same afterwards as they were before. They are supposed to be renewed or inspired, empowered even. That's why I continually speak of being Sister Who as being so oriented to service. It's not about whether or not I get attention. It's about whether or not I have helped someone, whether or not even in my unknowingness I have helped them to grow. And with these television shows, I never know who is going to be watching or where they're going to be. At this point, I have received responses from 5 of the world's continents. And so I know these people are either learning English or they're turning on automatic subtitles in a foreign language, or they're having a friend translate for them or something. And I'm very honored if I can contribute anything positive to the lives of individuals whom I have never met and may never meet. I am very honored to have accomplished that. I don't know that I can predict it or plan it, however, because I don't know who all of you are or where you are or what language you speak. And I studied German in high school and a little bit of French in college, but most of the world's languages I don't know. But even with that, it is so important for me to show up and do whatever I can do and give good things a chance to happen. And I thank you for watching, and I thank you for writing to me when you have watched, if it has been helpful to you, because I continue to receive messages, and the messages you send, you may have no idea whether I will ever get them or whether I'll understand them or not. But I want you to know that you are the reason that I continue to do these shows, because if I never received any response, then at some point I would have to wonder if anyone was watching, and if no one is watching, then why am I going to so much effort to create these shows? And yet the reason I do is because of these impossible synchronicities that have happened. When I was hiking on Quandary Peak and heading up to the summit, and a woman came down the trail and asked, "Aren't you the one I've seen on television?" And I kind of joked with her and said, "Why, yes, how did you ever find me?" Because we were 150 miles out in the wilderness, and it wasn't that she came out in the wilderness looking for me, but it was such an unlikely synchronicity. And yet by being there, and there have been so many other times when I have met people along the trail who needed to talk to Sister Who, but I didn't realize that until after they told me what effect Sister Who had on their lives. I am honored to serve all of that. And I am committed to doing so to the last breath of my life. I just don't know what resources or opportunities will be available to me, because being such an anomaly, being without a tribe, without a community, being, as one person put it, a naturally developed sacred clown instead of one that was developed and mentored within a tribal context of or a communal context of any sort. Being a naturally developed sacred clown, I've had to learn everything by reflecting and studying and noticing and minding all the details. So in that sense, it's a good thing I'm autistic, because autism helps me to notice all the details that I would have to notice in order to make sense of being Sister Who does she think she is, and of keeping track of how that changes and evolves throughout my life. Thank you very much for watching. I hope some of the things I've said in the last half hour have been helpful to you. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen.